Hi, and welcome everyone. This is Varleigh at Lavender Sky Panther with you on Sunday, February 22nd, 2026, and it's 9 p.m. Eastern where I'm at. So if you could make it here, thanks, whether you're new or returning to this channel. And we're going to have a fun topic tonight. I don't know why when I do the cover art, it goes like, mostly with a black background. I'm going to mark this session here with the cover page. But anyway, walking on the moon is what we're going to be doing. Now, I did mention in the little description before I head of the show that, regardless if the skies were going to be patchy or not, we were going to do this show. And that was a little teaser and a little hint drop of what was coming in the show. So, because later on, when we get there, and I'm mirrored, we're going to be talking about the actual patches and the artwork that is involved on some of the moon missions, Space Shuttle, SpaceX, Blue Origins, Artemis, you name it. We're going to cover quite a gamut of things today. So I was going to last night do some join an astronomy club and check some things out, but that got canceled due to the patchy skies, cloudy skies. So, but regardless, we're going to do this now. Before we get fully into it, I just want to take a moment to ground down before we look up to the skies and looking up whether it's low Earth orbit or higher up. But before we get there, so much has been going on in the, news cycles, if you will, in the media. And I generally just tune it out. So if you're on an awakening path, you're kind of onto a lot of the darkness that's going on out there. So I just want to say, don't let that get to you. If it's new to you, some of the news coming up, just be like, okay, if it rattles your cage a bit, look at it, but then quickly kind of move through it and just find other people that you can talk to about it that can help ground you back down. And again, if it's old news to you, what's going on and what's being released, just a good reminder just to kind of tune it out. There's really no big surprises for some of us anymore. And just remember to get out in nature, spend good time out there, earthing, touching a tree, whatever, because that's what's true and real. All this other stuff is just kind of, craziness. So it's kind of like, I just want to throw out an analogy, with a storm. You can either be in the eye of the storm and be the calm and be the anchor in the middle of it and just watch the craziness swirl around you kind of while you're eating chips or whatever, non-GMO chips. Or you can get caught up in the crazy. If you step out into it, you become consumed by it and just spin around. It makes no sense. So just remember to anchor into yourself, just kind of observe things, zoom out off the chessboard. So if the game of life is, popping up things that just seem very low vibed and not that great, and you don't want to be sucked into that vortex, just get off the game board. Imagine yourself zooming out and saying, nope, I'm not playing that game. You have a choice. I consciously say I choose. I don't want to be a part of the matrix or any of these systems that are, anti-humanity. So I zoom off of it. I observe the game. And from that vantage point, we're calm and we can make clear and good, decisions, and also making them more from the heart space than the brain as it is. All right, so that's just my little bit before we get going. So now, assuming we're grounded, we can kind of anchor down a bit, maybe take a deep breath, exhale. I know I need to for a moment. And now we'll look upward. Okay, so if you're new to this format of what I'm doing here over the last few shows, I'm just connecting in and saying, okay, team, my divine team, and it consists of a lot of different things, as I mentioned in previous live shows. I just say, okay, what do you want me to bring through? What should we talk about? Well, something very interesting popped up. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, it was about these, the patches and the artwork. And I remember I took a trip, and I do have a deck of like all of this. Like I say, have a PowerPoint presentation. This one has quite a few pages, but I like to just hold up the sheets rather than let the PowerPoint run through. I just find it more fun. Nice to hang on to like real things and not just virtual ones. But anyway, as this topic came up, something about all of the patches on the missions. And if you know the military at all, which I'm not involved in at all, but I have knowledge of it, I know they have like different missions, like each division of whatever with the military has patches and design, and they care about them a whole lot. And the symbolism means a lot. And so I remember I did go to Cape Canaveral, and I did go to the NASA, Cape Kennedy Space Center years ago. And this is before I kind of had a really I was awakened, but not, there's many levels of awakening into this, spiritual path is what I'm talking about. But I hadn't like fully awakened. So I found myself at this space base And I wish I knew then what I know now. Or let's just say I wish I had a lot of the questions that I have now back then, but I had some. But what I didn't realize was how many, for example, how many space shuttle missions there were. There were like 135. I only remember a few, and unfortunately, the disaster one and others, just a handful. And then I come to find out there are 135. Would you know that there are 135 patches, one for each mission? I guess you can well guess. And each patch, I mean, I could spend a whole show going over each one. So I'll just cut to the chase and zoom forward. My favorite patch, and I will be showing you a lot of stuff in visuals, turns out I picked one out of seeing a whole wall of patches. And just from a graphic standpoint, not a symbolic one, not if we get into dark arts symbolism, as yes are in some of these. I just thought graphically, which one did I like? Now, I'm a sun person, not a moon person. Just like if you are a cat person or a dog person, sure, you can also be both. But for me, I always, pun intended, gravitate toward the sun and the imagery of it. And it's probably has a lot to do with I grew up in Florida. And then when you get into the esoterics of it, I don't like anything hidden. So I want the sun and not the moon, that kind of thing. Now, if you are all in on the moon and love the moon goddess energy, I'm not taking anything away from the moon. But of course, the moon has many aspects of it, many facets, and many overlays and many dimensions, as does the sun, as does everything. So I'm going to be throwing out a whole lot of different topics, just kind of seeing it through my, point of view or whatever wants to come through. But as always, whatever I'm presenting, we may totally disagree, and that's fantastic. That's actually better than all of us going, to every single thing, because that promotes good discussion, that promotes more questioning and getting to some more insights and deeper, insights too. So some of this is going to be coming from quote unquote book knowledge. Others will be coming from intuitive sense and also direct experiences. Now, as I always say, I would love to hear if anybody wants to drop in a chat. I can see numbers that people are there, but it doesn't always show me if somebody actually comes into chat. And no pressure if you don't want to. But if you do, also take no offense if you're like, well, I'm here and I'm commenting and Varleigh is not saying anything. It's because then I am sometimes heavily shadow banned, sometimes not. Who can tell when? So that in itself is an adventure. But anyway, regardless, I will get into it now. I think I'm ready. Needed a little warm-up time as it was anyhow. So what I'm going to do is show you the cover. I want to show you why I did this cover this way that I did it. So obviously, because of the moon. So the first thing I started with was the crescent moon, just from a design point of view. In the background, unlike some of the, I'm going to poke fun at a lot of things. And again, we'll see if we get to it, what everyone thinks the moon is, and if we've been there. That's a whole nother fun topic. I find it fun. But anyway, in a lot of those photos of first walking on the moon, we don't see any stars in the background. So I made sure I dropped my own stars in the background. These happen to be fairy lights. Now, the reason why, too, I put fairy lights in is because over here in the lower corner, that's actually a photo of a fairy. That's a still taken from video footage. And I'm going to put in the description box below all of these references. So there's a show that I did based on an amazing find by a YouTube channel called Sugar Seas. She was reviewing some video footage outside of a cave somebody had done outside of a cave in Greece. And what looked like maybe like a moth flying around, it had a very distinct flight pattern. Something about it caught her attention. And she captured it, and I did what I do with my photo analysis, like I do with my sky watching part of my channel. And I zoomed in, enhanced it, and got to a level of detail where it's an actual fairy. So I will link that show below. But the reason why I'm putting the fairy here is that, sure, we know about walking on the moon with the footsteps, supposed ones and all of that. But there's also a lore with pilots out in space, we'll just say, astronauts, that they would see whether they're in low Earth orbit or higher up. I'm not going to get to that yet. But when they're out, let's just say, in the upper reaches beyond regular airplanes, that they report have seen entities almost like blue angels. And if you think about it, that's the name of the Navy's fighter jets, the Blue Angels, right? One of the branches. Funnily enough, another Air Force one is called the jet fighters or the Thunderbirds. So it's interesting too. It's kind of like a mythical lore thing going on of the Thunderbird. Anywho, I thought let me put that in there because that will remind me to address that there was a thing about pilots seeing these beautiful, glowing beings. Some said like a bluish hue or angel-like. And they even refer to it, since I do like to bring popular culture into my shows, I will be referring to movies and books and whatnot. It was the movie, the prequel Star Wars one, the very first one, Phantom Menace. The little kid is talking to somebody, and he goes up and says, "Oh, you're a Jedi or a pilot, and whatever." And then he sees this girl and he goes, "Oh, are you one of those angels that the pilots talk about from space?" I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like that. So anyway, that's why I put that in there. Now, up here, this comes from another show that I did, where that was sitting in the middle, cloaked, of the Masters, the Golf Masters tournament a couple years ago. And I was walking across the room and I just saw it across the room on a big screen. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's sitting there cloaked, but it's big as day. And even the golf commentator was like, oh, that just must be some condensation on the lens. Meanwhile, other people were like, no, that doesn't look like condensation, but they didn't know what it was. So that's a really fun show. I'm going to put again in the description box below. Here is a shuttle. Okay, now this one was a cloak and craft that was just on the street. I watched this thing develop over the course of about 20 minutes. Started off with just a little few tufts of this, what I call plasma, the cloaking material. And then over time, it developed a little more. I was looking in the other direction, documenting stuff. I turned back and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing's looking like a shuttle. And it was just staying in the exact same place, fairly low, in the sky. And that's a really great show I'll point to as well. But I'm gonna come in closer on it because this thing is one of my best finds. This thing had so much detail at the end of the day that you see up here. That's a pure circle. It's like a shield, and it's very symmetrical. So you got the controller deck up here, and that's like the bow of it, the ship, and that's one of the wings. Anyway, I go into great detail on that. It's in my playlist as well. So I just was, kind of putting some of these elements together. It was starting to be fun visually. And then here, this is also from another one of my shows. Let me go like this. I got to switch. This triangle was, really low in a quote unquote cloud in the sky. So lots of things to find in the sky if you dare to look up, just even, in a regular daytime, nighttime sky. I challenge everybody, throw it out there. If you're not doing it already, just spend 5 minutes a day just looking at the sky from one point of view. Watch, if clouds are moving, you might see some coming, together. That's not natural cloud activity. That's two cloak and craft docking, because wind physics doesn't work that way, that you have two things coming together, right? Or you might just see some weird things in the sky. But anyway, I go in detail that with all of that on my other shows. The first 200 shows are all about skies and sky watching. And I put a lot in the posts section and also shorts, So again, it's just whenever they present themselves, I throw them in there. Well, let's get into this about the moon now. So I want to just mark it also with a crystal of the day, because that's also part of the channel here with natural things and also crystals. So I'm just going to read them off and then I'll show some examples. So of course, since we're talking about the moon, I have to include moonstone. So there's black moonstone, and there's just regular moonstone, and there's rainbow moonstone. And then I'm also going to throw in black opal and white opal because they kind of remind me of that. Now, I only have an opal example. Actually, I'll start off with that before I show you the pictures. This is set in a piece of jewelry. I don't know if it's going to turn out. Yeah, you can see some fire and some flash in there. That's regular opal. And the rest I'm going to show in pictures because I have some specimens, but I couldn't find them for the show. So, but we'll go here. Let me keep this straight. So we've got black moonstone. If you're not familiar with it, does look like this. These are pretty well representing it. They're very interesting looking. Now, as always with crystals, you got to go by the vibe. And I'm not going to go into what each one of these does right now. I'm just kind of dedicating it as crystals of the show. I may write more about it in the description box below. But, that's black moonstone, that's regular moonstone, and that's rainbow moonstone. And then we have a couple different kinds of black opal here and regular opal. And so, again, I may mention some things. Lately, there's a lot of crystal meanings and symbolisms and ways that they heal that you can look up by the book, like what people will write about and say that what they typically do. However, more and more for me, it's you've just got to hold each crystal and see if that's still holds true for you, whatever is being said in the book. There might be other things that you do with it because you just feel it, that it's the right one to do something completely different. So just like this show, it's good to look at book knowledge, but mainly also going how you feel with something and go by the vibe. All right. So with the moon, we got that just as like the crystals. And now we have a lot of songs getting into popular culture, songs about the moon. So before I even put this up, I don't know if you can think of any right off the bat about any song that has either moon or moonlight in it. The more I started looking at this and putting this little sheet together, oh my gosh, like there's so many that this sheet, you know, would be like 500 sheets. So I'll just go very quickly. I'm just trying to go in memory when I threw these different graphics up here. So we have Billie Holiday, Blue Moon. We have, I put this in the post section of a YouTube of somebody who's actually playing this. This little thing is like a plastic. It's like a thin sheet of vinyl, like very flimsy, but you could play it on a record player. And it's like this cheesy, but yet very catchy birthday song. And it was one called Captain Zoom, and he goes to the moon and on and on and on. So it's total moon theme. You can even see by the graphic, he's riding up or, you know, in front of the moon. And anyway, it's one of those formats where they just sing the same song and then they just interchange with whoever name is, like, hey, Andy, it's your birthday. Or hey, Charlie, it's your birthday. And they just change, you know, the name out. Anyway, I just put that in there. Fun, but annoying song. So anyway, then we have Sting, Dream of the Blue Turtles. He had Moon Over Bourbon Street. He also did In the Moonlight or Moonlight on the Sabrina remake of the movie Sabrina soundtrack. I just have this sheet music to remind me. We have things like Fly Me to the Moon. Frank Sinatra made that one famous, but a ton of people did covers and sang that one too. Anyway, Moon Over Miami and just a bunch of other things. Duran Duran had New Moon on Monday, and All I Need Is Now talks about dancing the swaying in the moonlight. And anyway, very interesting. Now, I did cover in another show things about like the Victor. You have the symbol of the dog, you know, listening to the gramophone there, the cone. And very interesting, too, there are things like Mercury records. We're going to be getting into it with the space programs that we had, the Mercury missions, right? Anyway, we'll get there. There's just a lot with that symbolism. Okay, then we also have moon in the movies. So there may be a few movies that come to mind. Maybe think about it if you think of anything right away when you think of the moon showing up in a movie. Again, tons of movies out there. I'm just going to highlight, 3 or 4 here. So we have Wallace and Gromit, and I put that on the shorts. On the posts section of my channel if you want to see what that's about. A British-made Wallace and Gromit claymation, A Grand Day Out, where they go up to the moon. Then we have Moonfall, which was a more recent movie in 2022, and that's, I think, the same producer or creator as what was that awful 4th of July one, Independence Day. I think it's the same guy. Anyway, lots of different thoughts here. I think there are some hint drops in this one. I'm not going to go too far in case anybody wants to watch it. In the right mood, it can be interesting. If you're not in the right mood, it's really cheesy. And another one is cheesy, awful disaster films. However, I think there's some nuggets of truth in here. Okay, but it involves a space shuttle and the moon. And actually, I'll just say they spent a lot of time talking about Mare Crisium. And that's one of the mares, which we're going to get to later, one of the oceans, or they call it, that looks like an ocean from afar, the dark part of the moon, dark patches of the moon. They refer to oceans, seas, lakes, or even capes and things like that. Very interesting. Anyway, I digress a little and get to that later. Now, we also have Star Wars, the original from 1977, and the famous quote by Obi-Wan Kenobi, "That's no moon. It's a space station." So I had to include that. And then we have Return of the Jedi. And in that one, they talk about the moon of Endor. And the moon of Endor has a tractor beam, which keeps the Death Star protected as it's getting constructed. And I put a little thing in my posts about that too, a little video clip that somebody analyzed the moons of Endor. So it's pretty interesting. Now, I know that's for any Star Wars fans. If you're not a fan, you can skip it. I have a Star Trek reference coming up for anybody who definitely just doesn't want to talk Star Wars, but wants to talk Star Trek. Okay. Now, another thing surrounding the moon is, first of all, the first, the steps on the moon, which was Neil Armstrong coming out first and then Buzz Aldrin. And I'll just say reportedly, let's just say that, okay? Whether, because some of you out there might be of the mind that, hey, we never did walk on the moon. I'm kind of in that camp as well, but we'll get to that later. But regardless, we'll just go by what the reporting is. So that was the order of the people coming out onto the moon and making those one step for, giant leap for one step for, what was it? You know what I'm saying. I'm not going to go to it now. But they landed supposedly on July 20th, 1969 at 10:56 p.m. Eastern. All right. I want to say the time 10:56 p.m. because you got, instead of like a 9:11, you got a 10:11 because the 5 and 6 together, 5 plus 6 is 11. So 10:56 is like a 10:11. And that's a lot of like secret society code in there. But I'm just going to drop it off for there. So that was anyway, July 20th, 1969. Now, in the height of the mid 50s to the early 60s, maybe extending a little further into the 60s, was a movement in the design world for like home furnishings, anything to do with the house. In this case, I'm going to show you silverware, swing sets, curtain patterns, clocks, games. You had what was called mid-century design. In there was what they called, there were houses called Atomic Ranch, or, they had these atomic starbursts in the design. So I'm going to just show you what was going on at the time. So it was all this buzz about, again, kind of a pun intended with Buzz Aldrin, but there's all this buzz about the space race. And that was carried through and reflected into a lot of the designs. And so you have, some of you may have these still in your household or know of them or grew up with them. But, like here we have the silverware even has like the little atomic starburst happening on glasses, and then we have like this game, which is all about a moon base. And these are some of, the star designs happening, in curtain patterns. I put the swing set because it doesn't reflect it in this drawing, but sorry, this is always reversed for me, so bear with me. But this was the style of some of the swing sets in the late 60s, early 70s. And actually, when I grew up, we had one where the poles, these were metal poles, were like metallic blue, and they had crescent moons in white and stars, and everything was about space, So we had these. So, I'm just bringing it up because kids growing up at this time, like myself, we may not have been old enough to have seen and remembered, and maybe some of you are, but others of us, and of course, if you're younger than me, you would not see it live, no chance. But, I was like on the cusp of maybe seeing some of this, but I missed the Moonwalk. I mean, the first one in 1969, not the Michael Jackson version. That's another story. But I grew up with these. So I grew up with this exact same silverware set. I grew up, remember seeing these stars everywhere and, and some of these clocks and these swing sets. So look at all the different clock varieties. There's so many more, all of them showing this kind of star, sun, planets thing. So my point is, growing up at this time is very pervasive, all about the space race, even if we're just coming in on the fumes of it. And so then we'll get into later too, then what happened with the space shuttle stuff on the collective consciousness. But anyway, to just kind of round out the popular culture and stuff, I'm going to show one more thing. So up in this corner, this is a book called, what is it called? Something Jimmy Something's Moon Pie Adventures. So you may even know, and again, I'm USA based. So I'm just basing everything by the culture that I know. I know some stuff in Europe, I may have some overlaps there, but just assume stuff I'm talking about is USA based. So moon pies, some of you might know what that is. It's a snack. And actually, I happen to have one here. If you don't know what it is, this is one version. This is a single version. And it's like a graham cracker cookie with some marshmallow, like two cookies with marshmallow in the middle. And then they coat it with either chocolate flavor. There are tons of different flavors on this thing. You can look it up. But anyway, that's what a moon pie is. And actually it says, I can't quite read it, since like 1917 or something, if I'm reading that correctly. Anyway, goes way back. I never grew up with these, but lately I've been seeing them more and more. So anyway, we even have the whole idea of the moon in the treat, right? And but anyway, somebody wrote a book about it because people apparently really love those moon pie snacks. And then also, speaking of books, we have like books and nursery rhymes, and bringing this back up again. This is the cover from a previous live, but the Twinkle Twinkle Cat Fiddle Show. So we know the famous nursery rhyme is, "Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed to see such sport, and the dish ran away with the spoon." And so for me, that was total encoding on the springtime sky, northern hemisphere constellations in spring. So you got constellation Leo, Lyra, Taurus, and then the little dog laughed is Canis Minor, because there's a Canis Major, but we're talking little dog, so there's a distinction. Canis Minor. And then the dish ran away with the spoon is the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. So Ursa Major, Ursa Minor. Anyway, I was just so happy when I figured that out and put it in that show. All right, so that's enough of like some of the popular culture and lore. And then we have, I just wanted to throw in there, since we're looking up and looking at the stars, just a little reminder for at least for the Northern Hemisphere, and sorry to be so Northern Hemisphere centric, and I didn't create one for the Southern Hemisphere, but this is just a list of some of the official, quote unquote, recognizable constellations. So I'm just putting it here as a reminder in case any of you out there don't really think about it much. You know, we're heading into a time where there's a lot going on in our skies, and there's going to be a lot of alignments and conjunctions coming up, and really exciting ones. We're really in a really exciting moment in our recent history here. And so anyway, this is just a reminder, you might want to look at some, at least be able to name a couple if you don't know already, or find which one is your favorite. And what I like to do is, there's a whole list of these things, find the brightest star in each constellation even, and be able to name it. Like, I'll forget right now, but I always tell people for fun, you know, can you name the 3 stars on Orion's belt? And I used to be able to right away, but I know Mintaka is one and the other 2 begin with A's, so I'm not going to try to do it right now live. But it's just fun to kind of know, I think anyway. So that's just a little fun challenge if you don't know already, don't have that favorite constellation or star already. All right, now this is just a page with some notes that I'm just going to kind of read out. There is a lot going on here, but I'm just going to throw out some stuff, and then we'll get to some fun images. Just another thing related and surrounding the moon is the ability to remote view. So if you haven't heard of remote viewing, I'm just throwing this out as another topic, a side topic to go follow on your own time. It is an ability to, I'll just dumb it down to a basic definition. Is just to kind of connect in, and you can connect in a meditative way so clearly that you can kind of almost astral travel and be there and view everything, what's going on anywhere. It doesn't have to be just the moon. There's a better explanation of that, but that's all I'm coming up with for right now. Anyway, it is said that back in 1970s that the CIA, or that's who they're attributing it to, hired Ingo Swann to do a remote viewing of the moon, and it was called the Stargate Project. They say that on purpose, that it was not connected to anything with NASA. I don't know if that's true or not, but this is just going off of public information, which you can put on a Google search. Actually, I don't want to give them credit, an internet search. Anywho, it's just the ability to be here on Earth, but be able to, in certain sense, transport and actually be in the place that your target is. So in this case, he was hired to transport and check out, kind of see, without physically being there, see in a psychic sense what's going on, surrounding the moon. So I find that very interesting. So the questions of this would be, well, why did they hire him? What did they hire him specifically to do? And there's stuff written on this, and that's what I'm just going to drop for you if that's something that interests you to look into further. Now, plenty of people do that. You don't have to be paid by such a agency. Anybody that's now coming into the awareness that we have the world of abilities within us to do anything we want to do if we put our mind and our heart into it and learn how, we can just very naturally connect in and do these things. So anyway, there's certain guidance and spiritual guidance out there. People can help you do it if you want to, if you don't know how to do it yourself or have not just come here naturally with that ability to do it. So anyway, that's just, one aspect is remote viewing of the moon. Now, getting into other little, I'm going to just put a smattering of topics related to the moon, some more directly, some a little more loosely. But I also wanted to bring up Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer. He served as that April 22, 1963 to September 18th, 1967, supposedly. And what he did was very openly talk about ETs, UFOs, everything existing. He even went to the extent of naming that there are at least 4 distinct species of ETs and where they are inhabiting on the planets. So I recommend you go look him up, Paul Hellyer, Canadian Defense Minister. He was talking about this before anybody did, or he just openly talked about it and publicly in meetings. And so it's just something that's something I highly recommend you go look at his track and what he talked about. We have other people referencing the moon. I talked about the remote viewing. Some military people claimed that, yes, that the moon landing did happen. And again, I'm going to go down reportedly that if it did happen, some people were reporting that they saw like 9-foot reptile humanoids, so like reptilian types, at the crater, at like the rim of a crater, and that they were pretty much intimidating and like, communicating, don't you come back here. So that's one lore line of why, hasn't anybody landed back on the moon from the United States since 1969, right? Officially. So that's one whole line of thought. Others, and I'm being generic here just for sake of time, and I've got more things to cover, and I didn't get to like deep dive this. This is just kind of like a part one little, let's just talk about a lot of topics. And then if there's interest to go deeper into anything else, we can always do that later. But there were other reports of different missions flying over the moon. And they said, oh yeah, we saw little lights and they look like campfires on the surface of the moon, again, reportedly. Others said that, with, something landing on the moon, it rang like a bell. Well, again, that relies heavily that a moon mission actually happened where people did land on it. Others, look at the fact that, okay, supposedly all the moon landing, a bulk of the videos and information files, images around it, photographs, everything was just lost. I don't really subscribe to that. Like, how do you just lose one of the most important things in history, right? So that's a little sketchy and suspect, but I'll just leave it at that. Some say we never went there. Even Buzz Aldrin, in his advanced years, we'll just say, there's been a couple of interviews with him where he's talking about it like it's impossible to get there, which is very curious since he was supposedly the second man out landing and walking on the moon. Then you hear others in recent times, I think employed by NASA, but I don't know, this could also just be somebody in the scientific community. I remember seeing the video. I have to dig to pull it up. But I remember he was talking about the impossibility of passing through the Van Allen belts due to radiation. And he's like talking to kids about it. So, things are getting like leaked here and there, and I think they're credible, some of these things coming out. Then you get numerous footages that people are making fun of, even on YouTube, where you have where they're claiming that the being on the International Space Station is a farce because they're supposedly filming from inside of it, the space station, and yet people are seeing wires, like taut on the clothing pulling, and they're seeing objects, they're supposedly like floating, but then objects are just dropping down like gravity, like a pen or something. I think there's a lot to kind of poke holes in what's going on, and at least to start questioning. Again, if you're all in saying, oh no, it is what it is, this isn't, there's no room for discussion, well, that's okay. But, it's time to be open for everyone to be open to everybody's point of view, look at it, take from it what we will, form our each individual own opinions, and it's all good. Okay. Then, and then there's threats to like YouTubers who have been filming. I'm not going to put the names here. I might in the description box below later, who have been doing dedicated and excellent filming of the moon, have been absolutely catching objects that can't be explained, flying across it. Absolutely. I think all of you know where I stand. Of course, there are UFOs. Of course, there are unidentified flying objects that are maybe objects and are also spacecraft from others, let's just say non-human. Absolutely, it all exists. Absolutely, there's nothing to fear. And like I always say, in over like 5.5 years of filming every day, like stepping out day and night, watching the skies and catching exact cloaking craft. If you look at my work that I've posted and over 200 videos of it, different things, aspects of catching cloaking craft, I can say that again, now is the time we are the truth detector here. No listening to outside sources. Oh, the news says this or this. The news is probably going to be lying a lot in the coming, months, especially anything surrounding UFOs. I'm not using the word the government's using now with the UAP on purpose. That's the only time I'm going to say it, because to me, that's just to kind of get out of culpability of all the lies they've been telling forever. So if they think if they change the name and rebrand it, they'll say, oh, we didn't lie about it. We always told you about this. Meanwhile, they on purpose sabotage the name UFO. Anyhow, that's like a whole nother like legal discussion why they're doing that. But the point is that don't wait for anybody to tell you if they exist or not, even me. You may or may not have your own experiences with it. And I'm here to say, do not be afraid if you do. You may have one where you see something actually in the sky, or you see it cloaked, as many I have. I've seen one non-cloaked, actually more than once. I've seen it non-cloaked, but mostly cloaked. But you also may get visited in a dream, and it feels really real. And remember, we have been taught for centuries, decades, let's just say decades upon decades, to fear the unknown, to fear what might be in the sky. But I'm here to tell you, remember, there are many more benevolence out there. And a lot of these galactic things are your own family. Or let's just say, like, if you can better imagine it, like your distant relatives. Like if you live in the continent of the United States of America, or United States, let's just say North America, continent of North America, but you live in the United States, and say you have, a cousin and I always use this example. Let's just say I have a cousin in Australia. Well, if they came to visit me, it's just like, oh, that's my cousin from Australia. Well, think vertical or within the earth. Okay, this is just my cousin popping in from Venus or from, inside of Earth or whatever, but they're benevolent, just think of it that way. And like I say, in the 5.5 years that I've been sky watching diligently, there's only been like 2 instances where I saw something low in a cloud and I'm like getting a bad vibe from that. And so I just swiftly, with purpose, just walk inside. I don't have to be around it. That's the truth detector that we are now becoming. No longer listening to outside sources. Even me, you can totally disagree, it's fine. But should you encounter some of these things in the future, saying don't panic, don't worry about it. You're going to know if it's friend or foe and just act accordingly. Not crazy, not, going off the rails, just like, oh, I don't like the way that feels. You just calmly go inside or away from it. Or you're more than likely going to feel like a wonder, a childlike wonder, or even a euphoria at it. And then it's friends. It's family, friends and family, right? Okay, or at least something neutral. All right, now I just want to touch on too, I was talking about the mare at the very beginning, where when you look up at the moon and it's like the dark patches, people say that's volcanic rock or a basalt. I'm not sure which, but supposedly it's like remnants of a sea. The first mission, the landing on the moon mission, when the Neil Armstrong comes out, that was they supposedly landed at the Sea of Tranquility. Just saying. But anyway, if you want to get into all the names and the list of those, do look at my post section. I did just put a little diagram up, and also do your own research too, which is kind of a little point I wanted to bring up. Then we get into the issue happened back in last year in November to about, not this past November, the one before. From November to about January, there was this second moon that was being talked about in mainstream media. And I was at the grocery store. I was all over. I'm like, hey, this is getting exciting now and fun. I get to go out in public and people are going to start talking about a second moon. Well, I went out in public and nobody really talked about it, but it was something documented everywhere. So I'm just putting that up there because I don't know if you remember that. Now they're saying, here in this headline, they're confirming it as 2 moons into the year 2083. I didn't see that, but I did see that they're like, oh, there's this bigger object. It's supposedly a second moon, just came around a little bit and then left. So for me, connecting in on that intuitively, I can do the old Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's no moon. But instead of a space station, to me, it was a craft. And it was a benevolent type of group in that craft. And, a lot of these craft, I do document cloaking craft that are mostly just looks like clouds around them. But some of these craft further up, let's just say, are, well clad in like a stone material. They're meant to look like a meteor or a comet or something like that, asteroid type of thing. And you can know that it's different by how it comes into the system, how it leaves. If it just suddenly disappears, like they were saying that 3i Atlas was doing and acting all kinds of strange, all kinds of not definable, by typical movements of comets, then you can be onto it that, well, that just might be some type of craft that's not from around here, so to speak. Bringing up 3i Atlas and that craft not being from around here, I did have kind of an astral experience. I just call it astral because, and I just put this cockpit up for fun to remind me to talk about this. So we see this is just the cockpit from one of the Star Wars movies, but I'm just putting it up here because I had the experience where I was fully awake. I just went to lie down. It was nighttime, but no sooner than did my head hit the pillow, I was just kind of instantly drawn into a very deep sleep. And all right away, this scene started materializing in my mind's eye, and this never normally happens to me. And it was about the time that 3i Atlas was like passing closest to the Earth, supposedly, again, reportedly. Well, around that time, I wasn't consciously thinking about it. I knew 3i Atlas is probably some kind of craft just because it's acting strange. But then beyond that, I didn't think about it. Well, I was put under into this deep sleep. That's the way I have to describe it because I didn't feel like it was my own volition just crashing hard. I wasn't exhausted like that. Like I said, I was kind of just surprised this imagery was coming to me the moment I put my head down. But what happened was, and I'll just do this for a little bit of a visual. So what happened was I put my head down and all of a sudden everything's black, pitch black like this. And then all of a sudden I don't see a control panel like this, but I see electric like stripes, like red and white and greens and blues. And it's almost like something is etching a whole scene around me. And suddenly I am inside, I just knew it intuitively, some kind of cockpit and something in space. Now, I wasn't thinking 3i Atlas, but then later I realized, oh, that must have been what it was. So anyway, I'm instantly in this craft. Now, there's a being, and I only see the silhouette of it from behind, but I knew right away I knew this person or this, species. Kind of it felt like a small Sasquatch from behind. And I remember it felt like family, or it felt like a family friend. It felt like somebody very dear to me, or somebody I knew well, or like a coworker I'd known for decades or something. And that there's mutual care and respect for. Anyway, it was somebody I knew. And I remember suddenly like crying really hard, and it was really real. And the crying, I couldn't stop. And I was having a telepathic conversation with this being, and I was like, oh my gosh, if I go, I'll never see you again. And the being, and again, this was like family relationship. And the being didn't turn around, but just said, oh, yeah, oh, it's okay, you will. And I said, no, I won't. And I kept crying. And it was just really sad at this like parting, right? And then finally, I just poofed out of, disappeared out of that craft. And then I was back in, back here on Earth. So I just wanted to bring that up because that's an example where it was a very real experience. And I do believe that was galactic, quote unquote, family interfacing with me. So again, we don't need to see anything on the news. You don't even have to see a craft in the sky. You may have experiences like this. Again, nothing to fear. Now, if anything has a negative vibe, then you can wake up out of it and do a spiritual cleaning of your area or whatever. But this wasn't. So I felt it important to bring that up because there's no reason to fear. We are in a time now where we are more powerful than we have ever been as far as being a spark of life, of God's spark within a human body. And if we can remember that, that's the whole, I think, part of the point of all of this is to remember that we have everything we ever could possibly need within us or ready to instantly activate wherever we are. So feel that you are equipped. You're equipped to handle anything at any given time and no fear whatsoever. Okay. Now I'm jumping around a bit, but now I'm going to try to fly through the rest of this. that I have here. So I'm looking at a time, and I'd kind of like to keep it under an hour. Don't have to, but I'd like to. Anyway, we're going to go now to my experience where I don't remember the year, but it was after the Space Shuttle Atlantis, definitely clearly after that retired. So I want to talk about the Space Shuttle and the U.S. Program, mainly based at Cape Canaveral, because that's where I actually went to in Florida. Now, there's space shuttles. Let's see, there were 4 space shuttles that were used on the daily. Was it, wait, 1, 2. Well, okay. There were more. One was reported to have exploded, the infamous Challenger expedition. But the space shuttle names, they were considered reusable orbiters, and the program ran from 1981 to 2011. So I'll just read them all. So it was the Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and the Endeavour. And there was the Enterprise, that's going to come up later for any Trek fans. That one was a prototype that started it all supposedly in 1977. So these aren't my own photos, although I had very similar ones, except for the ones lifting off. But anyway, I'm just holding up what I could find off the internet to explain my experience. So I did go see the Atlantis. So the Space Shuttle Atlantis is at Cape Canaveral in Florida. And it is displayed like this, kind of turned on the side. It's very impressive. Actually, they have the cargo bay open and the thrusters are in the back, and you walk around at different levels of this thing. Pretty impressive, I have to say, just to get an idea of the size, the scale of this stuff. So, and then we have various, this is one of the mission patches. Sorry about this. Here we go. That's just an example of one of the patches. I'm going to show you like all 135, but like kind of from a zoomed out view. And I'm going to invite you to look at each patch on your own, on your own devices. But anyway, so here's the shuttle. The principle, if you're not familiar with it, is that it just piggybacks on this huge thruster thing, and it goes up and drops its boosters and everything. And there's just kind of like this shuttle that flies around. And then apparently the shuttle would leave from Cape Canaveral usually and then land in Edwards Air Force Base in California. And what they would do is transport it back over to Cape Canaveral, piggybacked onto a 747. Now, if you want to have some fun, go and look this up and see how they did it, supposedly, okay? How they lifted and strapped this thing onto the back of the specially outfitted 747. That's a whole other thing of how they transport all this stuff, how they lift it and tip it and get it into gear, how they build it. Lots of interesting questions, once you get into that whole realm of figuring out the logistics of things and the timing that it all takes, especially relative to right now. They're supposedly doing a whole nother series of Artemis missions, which will supposedly have somebody walk on the moon again. Okay, so that's something else to look into. I'll talk about it a tiny bit more coming up. So another thing I want to bring up is space programs and the namings and the symbolisms of them. And what I'm getting at here is I'm going to show you in a few slides. I have a few more to go. After a few more sheets coming up, I'm going to get into the patches, for your clothing, the patch designs, and of the different space programs. So we know that, there was the Apollo missions. There's the Artemis coming up. There were missions called Mercury, Saturn, Mars, Gemini, Vulcan. I don't know if any of you know, there was just a recent Vulcan mission, and that's being put on by Space Force and ULA. So look that up. And one of those went off just the other week, and see what they're doing with that. And again, Vulcan seems to be another Star Trek reference. But anyway, there's also names popping up like Centaur. And so again, a lot of this is just like, why are they only using the Greek gods and Roman gods names? Now, SpaceX uses animals, so it's using eagle, dragon, falcon. And a lot of those, even though it's not a quote-unquote Greek or Roman god's name, those are symbols that are attributed to certain Greek or Roman gods or even Babylonian gods. So like the eagle can be considered associated with Zeus. Falcons and hawks can be attributed to Apollo or the Egyptian Horus. The dragon can be attributed to a few different things, including if you want to go, if you're going to go Greek with it, it's associated with Hera and Atlas. Atlas is another name used by the space programs. The dragon can also, if you take it back Babylonian, goes to Marduk, and that can be not so great, vibes going on with that. But anyway, I wanted to bring up one of the missions. So Apollo, I'm just going to touch on a few gods' names and just mention a couple of tiny facts, and we'll move on, or at least not facts, but whatever's attributed lore to it. So what I found interesting is the primordial Titan god, so the one starting it all before Apollo, is Helios. So we get helium, we get a lot of different names associated with Helios. I find it interesting because the Artemis 2 mission, which was supposed to launch soon, is getting pushed back because they're having leaks with helium. Is that a coincidence or is it code? For me, it's code there. But anyway, Helios is supposedly the primordial Titan god, meaning the actual sun, S-U-N. Now, Apollo, I always thought, oh, that's the equivalent of sun god, but no. Apparently, Apollo more specifically symbolizes the light of the sun, not the sun itself, or mental illumination. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Artemis, we've got that program active now. Artemis is twin sister to Apollo, goddess of the hunt, often depicted with a silver bow and arrow. And there's a lot of interesting things behind that. I'm not going to go in a deep dive on all the symbolism, so I'm just going to kind of drop and go on this. But see what you think of, or if you get any feelings around it or want to look into it further, or if this is just enough. Doesn't matter to me. Mercury. So we have now a Roman god. So remember, they're always, when you have the Greek gods, they're the Roman god counterparts. Like Hercules is in Greek is Heracles in Roman. Or did I do that the other way around? I think I got it right. Anyway, Mercury is the Roman god. The Greek god, is Hermes. The Greek god equivalent to the Roman god Mercury is Hermes. So Mercury, or Hermes, is supposed to be God's messenger, also a mediator between the living and the dead. Saturn is a Roman god. It's Kronos in Greek. Kronos, or Kronos spelled a couple different ways. Supposedly the leader of the Titans and father of Zeus. So there's that big rocket with, if you look in the past, with the big red letters, Saturn going up, right? Then we have Mars, the Roman god of war, protector of agriculture, father of Rome, and the Greek equivalent is Ares. Then we have Gemini. These are all like program names or mission names. In Greek, it's the inseparable twin brothers, Castor and Pollux, sons of Zeus, but two different fathers. And there are Castor and Pollux in one of the constellations. All right, Vulcan. So we got that program. Like I said, there was a launch, I think, last week on a Thursday. It was on a Thursday, whether it was last week or the week before. Roman god of fire, volcanoes, metalworking, and the forge. The Greek equivalent is Hephaestus, who supposedly created and renowned weapons, on that forge. And we have Atlas, the Titan, who he was punished by Zeus for battling the Olympic gods. And his punishment was supposedly having to hold up the celestial spheres and realms, particularly bearing the weight of them at the western edge of Earth at the Atlas Mountains in Africa. So I thought that was interesting. Then we have the Space Force. We're going to get into some of those patches showing the graphics. The Space Force, or ULA, and I meant to look it up. I forget what ULA is, but I invite you to look it up. Some of their patches are showing Godzilla and several-headed Hydra. And on one of my previous shows, I was equating that one, the Godzilla used to being Zeus and with the lightning, and that the Hydra was referring to Typhon, a primordial god of Titan. Then we have Centaur. There's going to be imagery of the Centaur coming up. And that's Chiron, who was supposedly considered like a wise teacher of the, Centaur form. So the Centaur is a man's body, torso, upper body, lower body is the horse. Now, some mythology, it's said outside of any of the wise ones, like a Chiron, supposedly the other ones were just kind of wild and savage and drunken, but that doesn't ring as true to me. But anyway, supposedly somebody like Chiron was advising the heroes of the Greek lore of, he was advising or tutoring Achilles, Jason, and Hercules. And actually, Hercules was supposedly needed when the Olympians were battling the Titans. They needed a human a part human to come in and help them overthrow the Titans, and he was one of the heroes of that. Now, supposedly, since I'm pulling a long thread, so I just want to wrap up this story of this arc. So so this Chiron tutor was helping Jason, Hercules, and whatever with their missions or quests. But then when it came to Prometheus, so that's a famous character in Greek quote unquote mythology, supposedly this centaur, Chiron, helped humanity by giving up his own immortality, so sacrificing his own immortality to free Prometheus. And so he got punished. Now, Chiron is called the wounded healer because he could heal everybody but couldn't heal himself. And supposedly a student killed him with a poison-dipped arrow or something, and he couldn't heal himself. So that was his punishment for helping humanity by freeing Prometheus. And Prometheus helped humanity by bringing them fire. He supposedly stole fire from Mount Olympus. So anyway, I know that's a mouthful and a big storyline, but I wanted to touch on all of that because, again, these space programs, they could name these things anything, but they religiously, almost, it's like a religion, name them categorically all either Greek or Roman. I find it fascinating. And again, the animal imagery can always be attributed to one of these gods. All right, now I'm going to move along, like I said. So here's just a placeholder because it just looks black because I did lighten it up to print it out, but it printed darker than I wanted. So I put a YouTube shorts I did of this back in 2022. I captured the Artemis 1 launch was November 16th, 2022 at 1:50 a.m. Eastern. I did go into a yard, look up, and surely saw it coming up from where it would have come up from Cape Canaveral to the north. And it was just like this enormous fireball, looked like a huge firework. And then all of a sudden it looked like it was coming at us. And then it went off to the east over toward the ocean and flattened out a bit and looked more like a little spark and like an ember, and then disappeared. So that's what I saw. Now, just to echo what I saw, here's the Artemis 1 launch ascent. I know this is all bitmappy and fuzzy. I'm just putting it here in very broad terms to show you that, this is the Artemis going up and dropping its stuff, and then it supposedly just then kind of levels out. So that is actually what I saw. Now, where it went after that, I don't know. But what I saw does track with what they're showing there. Now, this one too, and I invite you to look at the Artemis 1 mission and then also look at number 2 coming up. They've got 3, they've got everything pre-planned, supposedly even up to 20. So take a look around. That was news to me this week. So here with number 1, this is again bitmappy. It's just for basic illustrative purposes to invite you to go look at this in more detail yourself. But, it's just showing that, this thing is going to go around the moon. It's just supposed to orbit it the first mission and then come back. And it's making an interesting infinity pattern. That's a whole nother thing. But anyway, I invite you to look more on that because that could be a whole show in and of itself. Okay, now we are actually going to get to the patches. Like I said, we would, the graphics for them. So here are some for Artemis. And, I just grabbed what I could. So what I'm going to show you next coming up isn't going to be the be-all, end-all of all of the missions. So I just kind of grabbed the ones that I could best see. And some might be thrown in there from a different mission, so bear with me. But this is just, again, kind of to get you interested. If you're interested, use it as a springboard to look into stuff that you want to look at or not. So this first series of patches, I'm looking down at first as notes before I hold it up. It's going to be the Artemis mission and program patches. Now, one of them that jumps out to my attention says eyes, like eyes of Orion. And again, you kind of got a question. There's an obsession with the space program with Orion. So Orion's belt, you look at that constellation, and also with a triangle. So good or bad, I'm going to leave that up to you. I get kind of negative vibes on those names in conjunction with some of the imagery here. You may say, no, what? It's fine. And that's fine. Okay, we can, if we were in the same room, we could talk about it and lead to some interesting conversations. Anyway, but for now, I'm not going to put any judgment on it either way. But here's some of the patches. So that's just like the general program. As you can see, it has very much of kind of like the NASA feel where they always have kind of this red, track moving through. And then we've got some red and blue going on here. Here's the 2. Here's the mission too. It's kind of cool. They at least have like the moon with the craters and stuff, if you can see it. Sorry. Again, it's like reverse for me. So this one, that one's pretty cool looking. So some pretty interesting graphics. And then, you know, sometimes they put the names of the people who are going to be piloting or present on the mission around the perimeter, and sometimes they don't. This one they do. They're just, sorry, this one they do, they're small. So again, there's like so much detail in all of these that, here, let me get it centered on the screen. I'm sorry about the moving around. Here, I can barely see. How about that? I think that gets most of them. So anyway, this is just like a little, you know, bookmark for you to check them out yourself and any that extra appeal to you. And just for fun, as you look at all of these, maybe pick which one is your favorite. So again, I didn't go through all of them in detail, but just for right now, I'm going to say my favorite, again, without looking at the symbolism, whether it's dark or light, is the Apollo 13 with the horses, the 3 horses. Is it 3 horses? Yes. And the sun and moon. Okay. All right. So now we get to the Vulcan. As I mentioned, I didn't even know this was a thing until last week. So here we have some of the patches for, I think most of them are the Vulcan. This one is not. So strike that one out. I think that's a space shuttle one. But anyway, you start to see like there's a Phoenix and there's some, you know, different things going on in here. That's a Sphinx. I think that belongs to the Vulcan program. And anyway, I'll just hold it up. So again, just, you know, if anything hits you graphically to look at further, you might want to check it out. Check out the Vulcan program in general, right? And speaking of Vulcan, I'm going to put this up. Somebody was noticing this. So there's big talk about the Space Force, because we're going to get to those patches next. The Space Force logo looking a little too much like the Star Trek logo. And then you have one of the captains of the Star Trek USS Enterprise. I guess it's supposed to be Picard. Sorry, I'm a bigger Star Wars fan than Star Trek, but I think that's who it is. But anyway, you know, we've got like a swoosh running around it. You got the swoosh here. Sure, that's more of like a Delta looking thing, you know, not so stylized like this, but you got to admit there's a lot of similarities. So anyway, do you believe they ripped it off from Star Trek? I have to think that they definitely were heavily influenced by it, and also that we have references like Enterprise on the space shuttle prototype, and we have, you know, all the different kind of little buzzword Star Trek names going on. So anyway, I think it's kind of close, except better executed over in the Star Trek style. This one, to me, this looked kind of really basic. No offense to the designer, but I just, when they first were rolling that out and so proud of the flag, I was like, wow, I think stylistically, graphic design wise, I could have done a little bit better. Just saying. That's my personal point of view. All right, anyway, here we go. So here's some patches. I'm not going to zoom in. There's so many patches for Space Force. I know this one just kind of doubles up because this is somebody, I think, selling them. But you might want to go ahead and check that out on your own when you got some more time. What I am going to show, though, what I'm going to highlight at bigger scale where you can really see it, are some of these patches for Space Force. I'm like, what the heck are they thinking or drinking? Because some of these, you know, see if you agree, are pretty darn dark leaning. I'll just say, okay, I won't call it dark arts, but I kind of am. Okay, so here we go. Look at this. I'm going to point, what is this? Sorry, I'm not sorry. I'm not getting happy vibes here. Are you? And I haven't looked into the quote unquote official explanation of any of these designs, but I'm looking, I'm like, is that a joke? What the heck, right? And then we have like Godzilla. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong if these are jokes, but this is what I was pulling up that says it is part of the missions or part of the program. So here we've got, like I talked about earlier, so here we've got Godzilla and the Hydra. So to me, that's the Zeus symbol, and the Typhon, the Titan Typhon. Then we've got, you know, like this Chinese dragon looking thing. And then this looks like some crazed, you know, what do you call it? Little Red Riding Hood wolf. I mean, like, what the heck, man? And then here we have some kind of like Trojan or Spartan guy, you know, very warlike. More, you know, Hydra stuff or dragon stuff done in a certain way. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some really great dragons, but there are also some nefarious ones. And then up here, I'll just, you know, hold it up. Sorry, this is, again, a little weird for me to be holding it like this. But then we got like Star Command, you know, other things, let's just say. This one I'll hold up closer. Sorry, it's a little shaky, but just see what comes to mind when you see some of this stuff. Okay. There's that wolf-like thing and that. Okay. Anyway, see what you think on that one. Okay, now we're going to get to the Apollo mission patches. This one just kind of sums them up neatly. So again, the one I keep referring to that I have is this one. I have the actual patch on that one. I like it. I'm going to show you a different page that shows these two a little more clearly. But once again, we got the A with the 3 stars for Orion in the center. Okay. And again, this is just to kind of inspire you perhaps to look into these further. So here's the same patches, but they're just, instead of a circular format, they're done like in rows, in case that helps you look at them. So I'll just put that up in case you want to check any out individually. So they've all got very different designs, very fascinating. And then you can also, there's plenty of internet sites that will tell you who did the design, what it was for, who the crew members were, and all of that, right? Okay, so here's now Mercury Saturn mission patches. And okay, here we go. So here's the famous, Friendship 7 one over here. Obviously, big Mercury vibes going on. And again, I'm not going to make any commentary on it. I'll just kind of show you in case you want to go check these out more for yourself. Okay, just from a graphic standpoint. Now we get to the fun ones. We get to the space shuttle missions, where there are about 135 of these things. And I wanted to say that when I was at the Space Center, I did talk to an astronaut, and I did ask that astronaut if she had seen any of these, like any entities, anything interesting while in space. And she made it clear to me that they were in low Earth orbit. Like, she made a deal of it, not rude, but just saying, oh, well, we were in low Earth orbit. So I'm like, it's like the initials are L.E.O, L.E.O. I'm like, I wonder what low Earth orbit is. So in case you don't know, I'll tell you. Low Earth orbit is just, from Earth to whatever level the ceiling is. It goes from low Earth orbit is 100 miles up to 1,200 miles. So to me, I'm like, that doesn't feel that far, but that's what it is. So that's supposedly where you're going to find all of the junk that we put up there, we meaning humans, is supposedly satellites, anything taking imageries, your Hubble, all of that is supposedly in low Earth orbit. And that's also supposedly where those space shuttles flew. So the space shuttles are called orbiters. They were only intended to go in low Earth orbit. So I found that pretty fascinating for what that's worth. All right, so I have 2 pages of these patches. Now, they're going to be bitmappy. You're not going to see detail. But this is just to give you an idea of the scale and scope of what we're working with. Each of those represents a mission of the space shuttle going up, And I had no idea. I thought only a handful ever went up ever. And then here, if I can find it there, that's that one I showed you earlier up close a little bit more. I just happened to pick one. It's showing the top of the shuttle with its cargo bay opened and like a satellite in it. So, this is just for fun. If anything jumps out at you, to take a look at, you might want to look around just at all the symbolism of all these. This is somebody deliberately designed each of these patches. And again, sometimes the crew has input on them, I believe. And I think sometimes they might not. So just again, have a little look there. Then we get into SpaceX, okay? And those I couldn't get a nice, I tried searching. So again, you might do a better job searching this. I was just trying to get a clear, snapshot. Just give me one page with all of the specific SpaceX things. Now remember, the symbolisms are dragon, falcon, whatever else they're doing. So we've got like a red dragon, a purple dragon, a blue dragon. This is going to be very bitmappy. I have some clear examples, so I'm just going to hold it up briefly. Again, go check these out on your own for SpaceX. And again, SpaceX is supposedly Elon Musk's baby, or at least that's what attributed to him. When I went to Kennedy Space Center, they did have like one warehouse with SpaceX on it, and then right across the street was Blue Origins, the Jeff Bezos Amazon empire, one. So they're supposedly like rivals, but they're all in it together. It's not. But anyway, here's some more for SpaceX. Okay, some other designs, let's just say. Okay. All right, so then I'll get to some that are a little more clear. So here we've got like this dragon with a green crystal looking like thing in its third eye. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Have another dragon blowing the fire that's ejecting the capsule, right? Like fueling the capsule. And then we've got like this dragon boat, looks very Viking, right? And then like red dragons. So again, all very fascinating. Again, heavy symbolism in there. Having dealt with graphic design in the past in many capacities, you don't just do that, as they say, quote unquote, for shits and giggles. You are designing with purpose. There's a method to every line and color and image used. All right, then this is a little bit more, some other ones, and again, it's bitmappy, but this is more or less to show you shapes and colors and geometries, and maybe something jumps out at you. But you'll have a better time of it not looking at my visuals, but doing an internet search on your own. There's another page. I'll just hold up briefly, but it's, again, bitmappy. Sorry, I could not get better images, so it just gives you an idea of the different kind of formats. Okay, now we have also International Space Station patches, the ISS missions. And again, I think all of these are, so forgive me if one or two pop in here that aren't, but at my best searching, this is what I find. So they have a slightly different character. They're kind of a little all over the map with this one. But the typical, what's consistent though, is that they have the space station here with, here, let me change hands. Okay. Where, we have the core of it, and then these extremities, they have that same symbol kind of like everywhere. The more you look, here it is. So anyway, very interesting stuff. And again, since it's International Space Station, they're even incorporating the flags, and there's some names, but again, you will do better to go ahead and research. Look these up on your own where you have control and can zoom in on this stuff. But again, this is just meant to maybe springboard you into looking into some other interesting things. Then we get into Blue Origin, again, attributed to Jeff Bezos, the one that's kind of, the head of the Amazon empire. A fun little tidbit. I went to the same high school as him, but probably 5 years after. Anyhow, here we go. Blue Origin missions. And they're bitmappy, but gives you an idea of the character and feel of these are a little different from a graphic design point of view. And I'll get into, this is the last sheet I have. Okay, so with these Blue Origin missions, something interesting pops up. Again, like I said, nobody does graphic design half-assed, okay? When you're doing graphic design, especially at something at this important level, you're aware of each line, each color, each placement, each geometry, that you would put on a page. So nothing is done loosey-goosey. I don't know why I'm saying that word. I never use it. But what's interesting here is somebody went online. This is one of the patches. Okay, so looking up close, you can see, oh, that's just the craft. It's going to go up, and what's the big deal? It's saying, let me look at this. That's not reversed. Oh, NS31. Okay, right? No big deal. Oh, nothing to see here. Oh, yes, there is something to see here, because right away as a graphic designer, you already see it if you flip it around in your mind. But somebody did that for us, so they flipped it. So what we have is, now some people are just calling this conspiracy theory. But again, my point of view, my opinion, my channel, I'm saying they absolutely knew what they were doing. This isn't half-assed or haphazard. They're comparing that if you turn it around, turn this completely around, you have the Baphomet head, and there's the example of it. So yeah, that's exactly what's going on. I mean, even if you look here, and I just do this myself, okay, of course you see the horns and the face. That's not an accident. I'm just, again, my opinion. Anyway, back to it on a lighter note. Also, just some of the feel of these, it's very different than the other programs that from a graphic design point of view. And this to me kind of looks a little sinister. It feels a little sinister, but maybe it isn't. You see what you think and see what you feel. To me, this is almost like a dark arts seance table, and they're lifting something up and levitating it. That's just my impression only. But see what you think. Now, if you're like, no, that doesn't mean it at all, and this is just a fun space program, okay, that's fine. It's your point of view, and that's your story, and that's what makes it real. for me, I just don't get rosy, jolly, happy vibes off of everything here. But again, see what you think. There's also some fun things with that too. If you've watched any of those missions, the Blue Origins missions, there's the one video that shows that they landed and the crew was already getting out, but then they closed the door suddenly because then Jeff Bezos had to be the one with the special tool to open the door. I mean, that's documented, just saying. So again, see how you feel about all this stuff, right? And I think I'm going to end. I think that's all I'm going to say about all of this for right now. But I do have a pack of cards, and I wasn't sure how I was going to end the show, but I did pick these up at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Center one time way back when. It's got the Atlantis on the cover. And I think what I'll do just for fun is, since part of my channel too is doing some little mini readings from time to time, all high vibed. If I can open this quick enough, but maybe I can't. I can't do what I was going to do. I was going to open these and draw a card, but I don't think I can open it quick enough without making too big of a deal out of this. Give me 1 second. Let's see if I can do it. And also in the meantime, yeah, just be thinking of all I presented here. If there's anything worth looking into any further, I think, you know, regardless, a lot is surrounding the moon right now with the Artemis missions, with the Walkin mission. I mean, again, what's going on with the whole Space Force program? A couple of years ago, it came to my attention just driving around in Florida. There was an exit. Okay, I got it open. I'm going to shuffle these. I was driving around in Florida and I was taking an exit and I'm like, hey, wait a minute, what's SFB? That should be AFB for Air Force Base. And it said SFB. And I'm like, oh no, don't tell me that it's already, they're changing all the signs to say Space Force. And sure enough, that's what it was, Space Force Base. So I don't know. You know, we also have suddenly, it's no longer in the United States of America, supposedly it's no longer a Secretary of Defense. They're calling it now Secretary of War or War Department. That suddenly jumped up. You know, I think that was just like coming into use at the end of last year. So what's going on? Instead of like the Defense Department.org, it's like war.org or something crazy, or war.gov, I mean. So check into that too. Kind of me, you know, if that's news to you like it was to me, keep, you know, just word to the wise, you know, be listening out for these things because they have meaning. I'm not sure what yet, but it's pretty significant. I've never heard of something changed from Secretary of Defense. This is the first time in my life I've heard it as Secretary of War, something, or War Secretary, whatever they're calling it. Okay, anyway, we're going to end this on a happy, positive vibe. I have never looked at these, so apparently they have quote unquote fun facts. So I just opened the plastic off this baby, you know, so apparently they're showing stuff. I can't read that writing right now. It's too small. So now I'm just going to change up the energies and go into something really good and positive. Not that anything wasn't. It's all done in the spirit of adventure, looking at graphic arts, and also just checking in with your own intuition on all this stuff. And an invitation to look up at the skies day or night in total childlike wonder and just be, you know, amazed at what's going on, especially right now, because so much is popping off, let's just say, with all these space programs. I mean, again, I was amazed at how much is there. I mean, look at all those missions, and especially all the recent ones. And the fact that it's not just Artemis 2 is going to get ready, even though the launch time got pushed back, but it's like they already know we're charting it out to Artemis 20 as far as missions. Like, what the heck, you know? So definitely check around. I'm going to look more into it because, again, this is all fairly new to me. All right, so I'm just going to pull it, and if this means anything to anyone, I'm just going to hold it up. I'm not even going to interpret this one, but I'm going to show you. It just popped up, so it's going to be Queen of Clubs. So, you know, in a positive point of view, it's we'll just say it's like almost like a little lucky clover. But there's like a blue planet or orb, and just see what, you know, if you get anything off of this. Actually, it's saying Neptune. Actually, maybe I can read it if I hold it up close. Yeah, so this has everything to do with Neptune. It just says it's the 8th planet in the solar system, and revolution period is 60,189 Earth days, or 165 Earth years. It was named for the Roman god of the sea and is almost a twin to Uranus in terms of size and atmosphere. Okay. To me, what jumps out is whatever's happening, over here, that dark object, but whatever. All right, well, Neptune vibes, Queen of Clubs, twins. So I think maybe there's something surrounding Neptune on here. or if you see anything related to the sea. All right. But anyway, for me, just what jumps out is the Trinity, and looking at the clover is something very positive. So, all right. It's not quite where I wanted to go with it all, but that's what popped up. All right. Well, I don't think there's any other questions or comments. I think I just was supposed to do a little info drop on this. And again, hopefully you do your own exploring in the sense of adventure and find out some really good stuff. If you've watched this and something comes to mind, I want to give a big shout out to Roxy Girl. Thanks for dropping in at 222. I love it. You have 222 there. So excellent. Thanks for being here. But yeah, let me know in the future, whether you're watching this live or on the replay down the road. If anything strikes you from this, feel free to put in the comments section, what you were looking into, or, what was like, what I want to say, whatever I said, maybe you agree, maybe you don't agree. It's always good food for thought to talk about things if you come up with a different point of view or any interesting information that's either, gosh, I can't think of the words. I am blanking out, so I don't think I'm supposed to meant to say it. Just if you find anything that's along the same lines of what I've talked about, great. Or if it's something slightly different, it's great for discussion is what I want to say. So feel free to if you want down the line, to drop it in the comments below or drop me an email. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for being here. I wish you a gorgeous right now, just filled with tremendous peace and love. Again, no matter what's going on in your life, whether it's all smooth sailing or a very rocky road, I don't want to say you're not alone, but you're not alone. There's everything we're going through. This is an amazing time with amazing access to people on the internet or whatever. Reach out if you need somebody, if there's nobody in your immediate vicinity. And if there is, great. But, we're just in some very exciting times. Don't forget that, in a good way. And there is nothing that we're not going to get through. And there is much more of a higher vibe overall than not. So if you're ever concerned about, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on in the world, just know it's good. Okay, that I can say with absolute certainty. All right, so for right now, I give everyone a huge hug. Blessings, love, and peace to everyone. Until next time, take care. Bye.